Everyone knows Disney's anthem about wishing upon a star, but almost no one knows it began as a warning, not a promise. In 1881, Pinocchio was hanged for his mistakes, his maker too poor to save him. Disney bought that darkness, erased the violence, and recast struggle as a lullaby for obedience. What if the magic you have been taught to love was designed to keep you waiting and spending instead of acting? Because the real story behind Disney's most famous song changes everything you thought you knew, and the truth starts where the fairy tale ends. Florence, 1881. The streets are crowded with children who work instead of play, hands stained by factory dust, hunger gnawing at their ribs. In a cramped apartment, Carlo Collodi writes the first chapters of Pinocchio not as a fairy tale but as a warning. The story runs in the Giornale per I Bambini, a children's magazine, starting July 7, 1881. From the very first pages, violence is the rule. Pinocchio is not gentle or innocent. He is wild, selfish, and quick to anger. When the talking cricket urges him to work and study, Pinocchio answers with a hammer. The cricket's body is left on the floor, a lesson ignored. Poverty presses in on every page. Geppetto, Pinocchio's creator, is a poor carpenter who strips off his only coat to buy a spelling book so the puppet can attend school. The sacrifice is real: winter cold, hunger, and shame. Pinocchio immediately sells the book for a ticket to the puppet theater, leaving his father's selflessness unrewarded. Hunger is not a metaphor here, it is a daily fact. Collodi's world is full of children like Pinocchio, forced to choose between education and survival, punished for mistakes by a society that offers no safety net. The story's original ending is a noose. In the 15th installment, Pinocchio is strung up by the fox and the cat, left swinging from an oak tree, body stiff and lifeless. No blue fairy comes. No lesson is learned. Collodi's Italy is a place where children die for their errors and the world keeps moving. Only after readers protested did Collodi resurrect the puppet, but the darkness never left. Pinocchio's journey is a record of bruises, betrayals, and the cold arithmetic of poverty, a mirror for the children who read it, and a warning for those who would rather wish than act. Chapter 15 of Collodi's Pinocchio closes with the kind of lesson that cannot be softened. The fox and the cat, having promised riches from the field of miracles, drag Pinocchio to a lonely oak and tighten a noose around his neck. The final lines of the serial leave no doubt. He dangles, motionless, eyes glazed, tongue protruding, body swaying in the wind. There is no rescue, no magic, no blue fairy. For the children reading in 1881, many of whom knew hunger and loss firsthand, the message landed with the force of a hammer. In a world built on lies and false promises, trust in miracles leads only to ruin. Collodi's lesson was stark. Wishing is not enough. The price of ignoring reality is paid in full. The reaction was immediate. Letters poured into the Giornale per I Bambini, some from children, others from parents and teachers. The correspondence columns filled with pleas for Pinocchio's return, shock at the brutality, and demands for a different ending. But Collodi had written what he knew. In post-unification Italy, children died young, laboring in fields and mills. The story mirrored the world outside their windows, where the poor paid for their mistakes with more than tears. Editors pressed Collodi to continue. He relented, bringing Pinocchio back to life in later chapters, but the shadow of the hanging never left the story. Every new punishment, every brush with death, carried the memory of that oak tree. The original ending was not just a shock. It was a warning against the comfort of easy answers. In Collodi's Italy, there were no fairies waiting to save you. The lesson was as hard as the world itself. Hope, if it comes, is built on struggle, not on wishes. In 1938, Walt Disney secured the rights to Pinocchio, intent on turning a grim Italian parable into his studio's next animated feature. The purchase was swift, contracts signed, production underway before the ink dried. Early drafts clung to Collodi's darkness. Pinocchio remained reckless, violence and poverty woven through the storyboards. But Disney found the puppet too harsh, too alien for American audiences. Story meetings stretched late into the night, animators sketching and erasing, searching for a version that could charm rather than disturb. By summer, the most brutal scenes were gone. The hanging vanished without a trace. Pinocchio's sharp edges softened, his crimes replaced by innocent mistakes. Geppetto's hunger was painted over with a workshop filled with ticking clocks and wooden toys, poverty recast as quaint eccentricity. The talking cricket, killed off in Collodi's first act, returned with a new name and a starring role. Jiminy Cricket became the voice of conscience, a gentle guide always ready with a song. This was no ghost haunting a stubborn child, but a wise companion teaching obedience and the value of wishing. The film's budget soared to $2.3 million, a staggering sum in 1940. As animators reworked scenes again and again to please Walt's vision. Every trace of Italy's class struggle was swept aside, replaced with bright colors, comic peril, and the promise that goodness would be rewarded from above. When Pinocchio finally reached theaters, the box office struggled against the backdrop of war in Europe, but the transformation was complete. The original tale's warning had been erased. In its place stood a new myth. Innocence protected, wishes granted, and suffering resolved not by struggle, but by the intervention of magic and song. Leigh, Harline, and Ned Washington sat in the Disney Studios music department in 1939, searching for a sound that could carry a whole new version of Pinocchio. The story they were handed was no longer Collodi's world of hunger and punishment. Instead, Walt Disney wanted a lullaby, something gentle enough to erase the memory of a hanged puppet and poverty-stricken streets. Harline, a composer with a knack for melody, played with a simple, rising phrase on the piano. Washington, a lyricist with Broadway credits, leaned over the keyboard and wrote lines that promised everything. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. The song was not just background, it opened the film, sung by Cliff Edwards as Jiminy Cricket, and set the rules for Disney's new universe. Wishes were not dangerous illusions anymore, they were the path to salvation. The melody drifts above the opening credits, soft and slow, inviting the audience to believe that hope itself is enough. In a single verse, the story's harsh lessons about labor and consequence faded into the background, replaced by a promise that dreams come true if you simply wish hard enough. When You Wish Upon a Star won the Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1940. But its real impact went far beyond the Oscars. The tune became the emotional core of the film, the message that every child would remember. Harline and Washington had written more than a song, they had crafted a new myth, one that would echo through every Disney story for generations to come. The Blue Fairy arrives in Disney's Pinocchio as a gleaming figure of mercy, floating down from the stars to answer Geppetto's wish. She grants life to the puppet, promises guidance, and intervenes whenever Pinocchio is lost or in danger. In the 1940 film, her presence is central, not just a passing spirit, but the architect of every miracle. Each time Pinocchio falters, it is the Blue Fairy who appears, offering rescue, forgiveness, or transformation. The message is unmistakable. Salvation comes from above, not from within. In Collodi's story, the fairy with turquoise hair is enigmatic, sometimes nurturing, sometimes severe, never simply a wish granter. She lets Pinocchio suffer consequences, even faking her own death to teach him about loss. But Disney's Blue Fairy removes the threat of finality. She rewards obedience, erases mistakes, and delivers the happy ending. The dangers of Collodi's world, hunger, violence, abandonment, are replaced by the promise that someone will always appear to set things right, if only you believe. This narrative device is not just about magic, it is about teaching passivity. The Blue Fairy becomes the model for external rescue, the deus ex machina that tells children to wait for help instead of acting. In Disney's universe, agency shifts away from the powerless. The puppet's fate depends not on his own struggle, but on the intervention of a benevolent force. The lesson is subtle but lasting. Wish, obey, and wait. Help will come from somewhere above. The world, as Disney remakes it, is a place where wishing replaces action, and the answer to hardship is always a miracle, never resistance. Psychologists have measured what happens inside the human mind when fantasy replaces effort. Gabriele Oettingen at New York University tracked how wishful thinking changes motivation, and the results are clear and unsettling. In controlled studies, participants who vividly imagined positive outcomes such as winning a job, finding love, or achieving goals showed a measurable drop in energy. They relaxed as if the goal had already been reached. Systolic blood pressure fell by an average of 4 millimeters of mercury, a physiological sign that the body was relaxed as though the reward were real. On follow-up tasks, performance dropped by 20 to 30% compared to people who confronted real obstacles instead of indulging in fantasy. In one experiment, students who fantasized about career success solved fewer anagrams and reported feeling less vitality than students who thought realistically. Across 11 studies, the pattern held. Positive fantasies without plans or acknowledged obstacles led to lower achievement and less effort. The missing piece was plans. Children exposed to magical thinking showed an 18% drop in persistence on problem-solving tasks. These are not small effects. The brain, flooded with dopamine, mistakes the imagined reward for reality. Dopamine makes the mind feel satisfied, and the drive to act fades. This is not just a quirk of the lab. Over time, repeated wish-based thinking can dull ambition, slow progress, and make failure feel personal rather than systemic. The more often a child is told that wishing brings results, the less likely that child is to push against real barriers. In the world Disney built, the act of wishing replaces the act of doing. The cost is invisible but measurable. Energy lost, action delayed, and a generation taught that hope is enough. Every Disney film begins the same way. The castle glows against a midnight sky, and a melody drifts out, soft, familiar, almost automatic. Those first notes of When You Wish Upon a Star have become more than a song. By the 1980s, Disney had woven this tune into the fabric of its brand, attaching it to the castle logo before every movie, every home video, every streaming release. The melody does not just introduce a story, it triggers a ritual. For many, it is a cue to feel wonder, to remember childhood, to lower defenses and open wallets. The repetition is staggering. Since the 1950s, the song opened Disney's weekly television anthology, echoing in millions of homes every Sunday night. In theaters, on TV, on VHS and DVD, the logo and melody have played for audiences in the billions, far beyond what any rating system could track. In theme parks from Anaheim to Shanghai, the same tune signals parades, fireworks, and the end of every magical day. Even the horns on Disney cruise ships sound out those first 7 notes, branding the ocean itself. That simple phrase of music becomes an act of branding. Brand architects call this an audio logo. For Disney, it is a spell. A few seconds of music tells you without a word you are in their world now. The wish is no longer just a song, it becomes the voice of the company played billions of times, shaping emotion on cue. Disney's market value now hovers in the hundreds of billions, a figure built not just on new films but on the relentless recycling of old stories and songs. The company's theme parks alone generate nearly $30 billion in annual revenue, each visit engineered to trigger the same emotional reflex as the first notes of When You Wish Upon a Star. That melody became a corporate asset. It is played billions of times in movies, on television, at park gates, and even on cruise ship horns. Each repetition reinforces loyalty and nostalgia, and that loyalty translates directly into spending. But magic alone does not keep these profits flowing. In 1998, Disney helped drive the Sonny Bono Copyright Term Extension Act through Congress, locking up its oldest characters and songs for an extra 20 years. The company spent millions lobbying for the extension, working through industry coalitions and using direct influence. The law kept Mickey Mouse, Pinocchio, and the song itself out of the public domain, ensuring that every wish and every memory tied to these icons would remain proprietary. Legal scholars called the law the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. For Disney, it was insurance, a guarantee that the dreams it sells would never become free. After the extension, the company's annual reports showed billions in revenue secured by those same protected works. The wish, now copyrighted, became a toll booth. Silence. A woman in her 90s remembers the hush in the theater as Jiminy Cricket's voice filled the dark. She was 7, clutching her mother's hand, believing for a moment that anything was possible if she wished hard enough. Decades later, she laughs softly. "We did not have much," she says. "My father lost his job that year." The song made me feel safe, but it never paid the bills. A young father stands outside a Disney park holding his daughter's hand as the familiar melody drifts over speakers. He admits he used to think the song was harmless, but when his child started asking why wishing did not fix real problems, he realized he had been selling her the same story he had been sold. A former Imagineer, now retired, describes boardroom discussions about the power of nostalgia. The goal was always to make you feel like a child again. If you felt wonder, you would spend. The castle, the song, the fireworks, it's all engineered. A folklorist sits among shelves of battered books, tracing the arc from Collodi to Disney. Fairy tales were meant to teach children how to survive a hard world. Disney turned them into comfort food. The rage, the warning, the struggle, that is what was lost. Each voice carries its own truth. The joy was real. So was the cost. Today, the song "When You Wish Upon a Star" plays in over 50 countries, embedding passivity as nostalgia. Disney's profits soar while systemic problems remain unsolved. The real world does not grant wishes, it demands action. Every time we sing that song, we choose between comfort and change. The stars' laws are not listening. The world is listening if we decide to speak. Share your thoughts below if you are ready to question the fairy tale.